But I want to bring you back to these reports that in the Oval Office, Sidney Powell, who had been part of your legal team until she was dismissed, has been there at least 3, potentially 4 times. So there's a rumor that she is trying to become, or people are advocating that she be appointed special counsel and that their voting machines be seized. Can you tell us what's happening in the Oval Office and what her role will be?
Let me say definitively, Sidney Powell is not part of our legal team. She hasn't been for 5 weeks. She is not a special counsel for the president. She does not speak for the president, nor does she speak for the administration. She speaks for herself. And she's a fine woman, a fine lawyer, but whatever she is talking about, it's her own opinions. I'm not responsible for them. The president isn't, nor is anybody else on our legal team.
Right, and I know some of these folks have picked her up going in and out of the West Wing. But is she, to the best of your knowledge, meeting with the president about some of these strategic moves to either impound or seize voting machines or become a special counsel to investigate fraud?
Well, look, it's my responsibility as the president's lawyer, along with Jenna and some of the others. We're going to be extremely aggressive. We're going to fight for our client as hard as we can. But we're also going to do it within the bounds of rationality, common sense, and the law. And it can be done. There's no reason to go beyond anything. This election was a theft. It can be proven. I can tell you one simple thing that would prove it, make the American people feel really good. 5 or 6 of these crooked governors could let us have access to the machines.
Do you realize how inept you have to be for Rudy Giuliani to come on air and affirm that in no way, shape, or form are you on his legal team? This is the guy who accidentally held a press conference in a landscaping company alley between a crematorium and a sex shop. This is the guy who had a box of Just for Men melt down his scalp. This is a guy who hasn't won a single case in any of his post-election litigation. And even that guy hears Sidney Powell's name and is like, yeah, she's not with us. The fact is that even Giuliani realizes what a catastrophic failure having a person like Sidney Powell serve as a mouthpiece for the Trump campaign has been. Now, let me just say that first and foremost, there are no legitimate claims to fraud or wrongdoing in this election. The Trump campaign and its allies have brought forward 59 cases, and they've lost all but 1 of them. And that was just changing a cure deadline from 9 to 6 days in Pennsylvania. Otherwise, every claim of fraud, of dead people voting, of machine switching votes, of observers not being allowed to observe, of mail-in voting being unconstitutional, every single claim has failed. But with that said, having Sidney Powell claiming that the CIA and DOJ, in conjunction with Cuba, China, Venezuela, and Iran, plus Republican officials, all coordinated to steal the election from Trump, turned an already bad faith effort into an absolute circus. She managed to do the impossible, which is to embarrass a Trump campaign otherwise incapable of shame. And yet still that hasn't stopped Trump from meeting with Sidney Powell on an almost daily basis. According to reporting, she's been visiting the White House almost all of the last few days, where Trump's been weighing naming Powell as a special counsel overseeing an investigation into voter fraud. In one specific meeting last week, both the White House counsel Pat Cipollone and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows aggressively pushed back on that idea, underscoring just how little support she has in this administration. And bear in mind, those left in this administration are the people still sticking around 4 years into what can only be referred to as a dumpster fire. So for even those people to be so opposed to Sidney Powell, pretty much tells you everything you need to know about her. Now, finally, Giuliani does eventually descend into the usual conspiracy theories and claims that all he needs to prove fraud is gaining access to the voting machines. Only, consider the fact that if he doesn't have access to the machines now, how does he know they were compromised? For weeks, he and other Trump mouthpieces have been claiming that the machines are rigged, that they're switching votes, that there are massive tabulation error rates, and yet he admits here that he doesn't even have access to them. So how would he know any of what he's saying? He doesn't. And all he's looking to do is get the optics of an investigation, because those optics would be enough to further perpetuate this disinformation campaign that there was fraud. The entire plan is only meant to manipulate people. Consider too that if any of these machines were actually compromised, there would have been vote count discrepancies when states did paper audits or recounts. And yet none of those audits in Pennsylvania, Georgia, or Wisconsin showed any variation from the initial counts, meaning that there was no fraud. There was no vote switching or tabulation errors or compromised software, because the paper ballots would have shown that and they didn't. And despite GOP fear-mongering, you can't rig paper. And look, we could go on all day debunking baseless fraud claims from the Trump team, but the fact that they haven't been able to provide a shred of evidence for their claims says it all. And frankly, whether it's Giuliani or Sidney Powell, they are all the same brand of bad faith sycophants only working to undermine our democratic process. And their legacies will all reflect that. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.